Imagine a small, forgotten organ sitting quietly behind your breastbone right now. You have never felt it. You have never seen it. Most people never even learn its name. But this organ has been making decisions about your future since before you were born. It decided how well you would fight off your first cold. It is deciding, at this exact moment, how you will handle the next one. And one day, long before your heart gives out, this organ will have already written the terms of how you die. Doctors call it the thymus. The ancient Greeks called it something else. They believed it was the seat of the soul. They were not entirely wrong. For most of human history, nobody understood what this gland actually did. It sits just behind your sternum, wedged above your heart, roughly the size of your fist when you were a baby. Surgeons who opened the chest during operations found it strange and useless. They assumed it was a leftover, a biological mistake, something evolution forgot to remove. They were about to be proven catastrophically wrong. In the 1960s, a young immunologist named Jacques Miller ran a simple experiment on newborn mice. He removed their thymus glands shortly after birth. The mice looked fine at first. They ate. They grew. They moved normally. Then something strange happened. Their immune systems collapsed. Infections that should have been minor turned lethal. Skin grafts that should have been rejected were suddenly accepted, as if the body no longer recognized the difference between itself and a stranger. Miller had just discovered one of the most important secrets of the human body. The thymus was not useless tissue. It was a school, a training academy for the immune system, and without it, the entire defense network of the body fell apart. This single discovery rewrote immunology, but it also opened a much stranger, much darker question. If this gland trains your body's defenders, what happens when the school starts shutting down? Because here is the part almost nobody knows. Your thymus does not stay large forever. It does not maintain itself the way your liver or your kidneys do. From the moment you hit puberty, this organ begins to shrink. Slowly, quietly, permanently. By the time you're 40, most of it has already turned to fat. By 70, doctors sometimes struggle to even locate healthy thymic tissue on a scan. The organ that once protected you from the inside is dissolving into a shadow of itself. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Because your thymus is not just fading in the background while the rest of your body stays young. Scientists now believe this shrinking gland may be one of the strongest biological clocks we have ever found. A clock that predicts, with unsettling accuracy, how well your immune system will perform for the rest of your life. To understand why, you need to understand what this gland actually does inside you every single day without asking for credit. Picture your bone marrow as a factory floor. It produces raw immune cells by the millions. These are called T cells, and in their earliest form they are useless. Blind, untrained. They cannot tell a virus from a healthy cell. They cannot tell a bacteria from your own skin. If these untrained cells were released straight into your bloodstream, chaos would follow immediately. Some would attack your own organs. Others would ignore real threats completely. So your body does something remarkable. It sends these raw recruits to a single training facility before they're allowed anywhere near the rest of you. That facility is the thymus. Inside this small gland, something close to a biological boot camp takes place. The immature T cells are tested, one by one, against thousands of possible threats. Cells that react too aggressively toward the body's own tissue are eliminated on the spot. Cells that fail to respond to real danger are also destroyed. Only a small fraction survive this process. Somewhere between 2 and 4%, according to research on thymic selection. The rest are killed before they ever reach your bloodstream. This might sound brutal. It is also the reason you're alive right now, instead of suffering from constant autoimmune attacks or catching every virus that touches your skin. The T cells that do survive graduate as elite, calibrated defenders. They circulate through your blood for years, sometimes decades, ready to recognize a threat the instant it appears. This is why the thymus earned its old nickname among immunologists. They called it the graduation ceremony of the immune system. But here is the twist that changes everything. This graduation ceremony does not run at full capacity forever. It has a shelf life built into its own design. At birth, your thymus is working at incredible output, churning out fresh, diverse defenders every single day. This is why infants and children, despite having weaker immune systems overall, can still adapt and respond to almost anything new they encounter. Their training academy is fully staffed. Then puberty arrives, and something strange begins. The thymus starts converting itself into fat tissue. Doctors call this process involution, and it is one of the most predictable, most universal aging processes in the entire human body. It happens in every person, on every continent, regardless of diet, lifestyle, or genetics. By your 20s, thymic output has already dropped significantly from its peak. By your 50s, some studies estimate that less than 10% of original thymic tissue remains active. By your 70s and 80s, in many people, the functional thymus is almost gone. And when the training academy closes its doors, your immune system is forced to survive on old graduates. The same T cells you built decades ago, still circulating, still trying to do their job, but increasingly outdated against new threats. This is not just an interesting biological detail. This may be one of the central reasons the human body becomes more fragile with age. Think about why elderly people are hit harder by infections that barely bother younger adults. Why a flu that knocks a healthy 30-year-old down for 4 days can put an 80-year-old in the hospital. Why certain vaccines simply don't work as well later in life, no matter how healthy someone appears on the outside. For decades, doctors assumed this was simply general decline, old age wearing everything down evenly. But researchers studying immune aging kept noticing something specific. It wasn't the whole immune system failing at once. It was one particular resource running dry: fresh, untrained T cells, the kind only the thymus can produce. Without new recruits entering the system, the body becomes dependent on an aging, shrinking pool of defenders that were trained years, sometimes decades earlier. These veteran cells are experienced against old threats. They are far less prepared for anything genuinely new. This is part of why new pathogens can be especially dangerous for older populations. Their immune systems simply don't have enough fresh graduates left to mount an adaptive response. Now here's a question almost nobody asks, because almost nobody knows to ask it. If the thymus is shrinking on a schedule that seems to have very little to do with how healthy you actually are, could scientists find a way to slow it down, or even reverse it? For most of medical history, the answer seemed like an obvious no. Organs shrink. Organs age. That's simply what tissue does. You don't regrow a gland any more than you regrow a missing limb. Then, in the early 2000s, a small and almost overlooked study quietly challenged that assumption. Researchers were testing a treatment combination on a group of older adult men, originally studying it for unrelated hormonal reasons. Almost as a side observation, the scientists decided to scan their thymus tissue before and after treatment using MRI imaging. What they found stunned them. In several participants, thymic tissue that had long since converted to fat appeared to shift back. Functional thymic tissue increased. Blood work showed signs consistent with fresh T cell production returning. The study was small. It was not designed to prove anything definitive about aging or lifespan. Scientists were, and remain, appropriately cautious about overstating the results. But it cracked open a door that had been assumed permanently sealed. If thymic tissue can regenerate under the right biological conditions, even partially, then the aging of the immune system may not be an unchangeable, one-way street after all. This idea alone has quietly reshaped how some researchers think about aging itself. Because notice what's happening here. We are not talking about wrinkles. We are not talking about gray hair or slower joints. Those are visible signs of aging, but they don't kill you directly. The thymus is different. It sits upstream of nearly everything that actually determines how long you survive. Infections, cancer surveillance, vaccine response, even the body's ability to detect and destroy abnormal cells before they turn into tumors. Speaking of cancer, here's where the story takes another unexpected turn. One of the thymus's lesser-known jobs is producing specialized T cells that patrol your entire body, looking for cells that have started dividing abnormally. Long before a tumor becomes large enough to detect on a scan, your immune system is often already fighting a quiet, invisible battle against rogue cells. This process is sometimes called immune surveillance, and it happens in your body more often than most people realize. Most abnormal cells are caught and destroyed before they ever become a medical problem. But this surveillance system depends heavily on a steady supply of properly trained T cells, the same T cells that only the thymus can produce. As thymic output declines with age, immune surveillance weakens alongside it. This is part of why cancer risk rises so sharply after age 60, even in people who have never smoked, never had risky diets, and have no family history at all. It is not simply that cells become more likely to mutate with age, although that's part of the picture too. It's that the body's internal defense against those mutations is also quietly losing its workforce. Two problems accelerating at the same time in the same direction. This might sound alarming. It is meant to feel important, not frightening, because understanding a problem is always the first step towards solving it, and scientists studying the thymus are not treating this as a hopeless dead end. They're treating it as a target. Around the world, researchers are now exploring several different strategies to keep the thymus active longer, or to coax it into regenerating tissue it long ago converted to fat. Some approaches focus on specific growth factors, like a molecule called interleukin-7, which appears to play a central role in stimulating thymic tissue regrowth in laboratory studies. Other research focuses on clearing out the fatty tissue that replaces functional thymus, theoretically making room for active tissue to return. There's also growing interest in simpler interventions. Exercise, certain dietary patterns, and maintaining healthy metabolic function all appear, in various studies, to correlate with somewhat slower thymic decline, though scientists are careful to note that correlation is not the same as proof of cause. None of this means a miracle reversal is available today. It's important to be honest about that. Thymic regeneration research is still young, still evolving, and still full of open questions. But the fact that this conversation is even happening represents an enormous shift. For most of medical history, aging was treated as a single, unstoppable, unified process. You got old. Everything declined together. There was nothing specific to target because there was no specific mechanism to blame. The thymus offers something different. A single, identifiable structure with a known biological process that appears to disproportionately influence how your entire immune system ages. It gives scientists something they rarely get with aging research, a target they can actually see on a scan. Now here's where the story becomes even more unusual, because the thymus isn't just involved in fighting off external threats. It also plays a bizarre and slightly unsettling role in something else entirely: autoimmune disease. Remember that brutal training process happening inside the thymus, where nearly all newly made T cells are destroyed unless they pass a strict test. That test exists specifically to prevent your immune system from attacking your own body. But that system isn't perfect. Occasionally, a T cell slips through that test when it shouldn't have. It graduates from the thymus mistakenly primed to attack healthy tissue, Under normal circumstances, backup systems elsewhere in the body catch most of these mistakes, but not always. Some researchers believe subtle errors in thymic training may contribute to certain autoimmune conditions, where the immune system turns against the very body it's supposed to protect. This remains an active and complicated area of research, and scientists are careful not to overstate direct causation. But it adds another layer to just how much influence this small, overlooked gland actually has over your health. It's not just about defending you from outside invaders. It's about your body correctly understanding the difference between friend and enemy in the first place. Let's step back for a moment and look at the bigger picture forming here. Most people, when they think about what determines a long life, think about the obvious factors: diet, exercise, genetics, maybe stress levels or sleep quality. All of those matter enormously. None of that is being dismissed here. But almost nobody thinks about a walnut-sized gland behind their breastbone that started disappearing before they even finished growing up. And yet, when researchers look at biological markers of aging, thymic function keeps appearing as one of the strongest predictors of what's sometimes called immune age, which can differ significantly from someone's actual calendar age. Two people born in the same year can have dramatically different immune ages. One might have a robust, still relatively active thymus, still producing a healthy stream of fresh T cells. The other might have an immune age that looks decades older, almost entirely dependent on an aging population of veteran immune cells. This might explain something you've probably noticed anecdotally, even if you never had a scientific name for it. Some people seem to bounce back from every illness effortlessly well into old age. Others seem to catch everything and recover from nothing easily, even in their 50s. Genetics plays a role. Lifestyle plays a role, but increasingly, scientists suspect the state of this single hidden gland plays a much larger role than anyone previously assumed. There's something almost poetic about all of this, if you sit with it for a moment. The ancient Greeks named this gland after the word thymos, meaning spirit, courage, or life force. They had no microscopes, no understanding of T cells or immune surveillance. They were essentially guessing, based on instinct and observation. And yet somehow, without any of the science we have today, they landed on a name that turned out to be strangely accurate. Because this gland really does seem to hold something like a biological life force. Not in a mystical sense, but in a very literal, mechanical one. It quietly determines how prepared your body is to keep existing in a world full of invisible threats. When it's strong, you're resilient. When it fades, so does your defense against nearly everything trying to end you. So what does this mean for you, specifically, right now, reading or listening to this? It does not mean panic. It does not mean obsessing over an organ you cannot see or directly control. Thymic involution is a universal process. It happens to every human being who has ever lived, regardless of how careful or careless they were with their health. But it does mean something important is shifting in how we understand aging itself. For decades, aging research focused heavily on wrinkles, joints, and visible signs of decline. Increasingly, scientists are turning their attention toward organs like the thymus, precisely because they may represent upstream causes rather than downstream symptoms. If you could keep this one gland functioning even slightly longer, slightly stronger, the ripple effects could touch nearly every other system in your body. Better infection resistance, stronger cancer surveillance, potentially even better responses to vaccines later in life, at exactly the moment when you need that protection most. This is why some researchers now describe the thymus as something closer to a master regulator of biological aging, rather than just another gland doing its own isolated job. It's not the only factor. It's not a magic solution. But it might be one of the most important, least appreciated pieces of the puzzle we've been overlooking for decades. Let's return for a moment to where this story began. That small, quiet organ behind your breastbone, sitting there right now, doing work you'll never consciously feel, slowly converting itself into fatty tissue, exactly as it has in every human being before you, exactly as science says it must. It has already shaped the immune system currently protecting you. It's shaped how you responded to every illness of your childhood, every vaccine you've ever received, every invisible threat your body has silently defeated without you ever knowing a battle took place. And somewhere in laboratories around the world, scientists are staring at scans of this same tiny structure, asking a question that would have sounded like science fiction only a generation ago. What if we didn't have to let it fade? Nobody has a complete answer yet. The research is still early. The path forward is still uncertain. But for the first time in medical history, the question is no longer whether this gland matters. It's how much of your future it was quietly writing all along. Somewhere behind your own breastbone right now, that same small structure is still working, still shrinking, still writing a small, invisible part of your story. You'll never see it. You'll never feel it. But it has been deciding, in ways you never knew to ask about, exactly how long your story gets to continue.